What's up YouTube, my name's Ravlar and welcome back to another Runescape 3 video. Today, Elite Dungeons 3 was released and it is an absolutely beautiful update, and this video is going to be reviewing everything about it. So, we're going to be looking at the new quest and the new items released with the dungeon, including the new sigils, the special arrows, and of course the Eldridge Crossbow. Then I'm going to be showing you guys some useful perks and items to bring with you to Elite Dungeons 3 to maximize your efficiency, and finally we're going to go over the boss fights and mechanics to make sure that you guys are ready to get your first kills on release, and hopefully this video is going to be interesting and informative to you guys. Of course, as a lot of things are being covered, the timestamps will be in the description below, so feel free to jump ahead. If this video does help you out, please do remember to drop a like and subscribe to the channel, it does help me grow a lot. But anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video guys. So for those of us who logged in alongside the update today, you guys would have noticed that there was a new quest on your quest log, and this is a new master quest which Jagex kept quiet. The quest is called The Curse of the Black Stone, and it has some very interesting rewards, which include a 10% reduction to all damage taken in every single elite dungeon. Now this seems to be a very useful reward if you ask me, and if you plan on farming elite dungeons, I highly recommend that you complete this quest. It does take some time, and I've heard it's not too pleasant to complete, but it will be worth it in the end. Intriguingly, no one actually knew that there was going to be a quest on release with Elite Dungeons 3, so Jagex kept that very quiet, but regardless, I hope you have fun doing it. Now, alongside the release of ED3, the reward shop in Daemonheim where you use your Dungeoneering tokens has been updated, and it now contains some new items, so let's have a look at what they are. You can access the shop by going to Brill Thok. I don't know how to say his name, so yeah, let's just call him Brill, and seeing what he has to offer. If you go to the Consumables tab, predictably there is a new lucky charm added for Elite Dungeons 3, which costs 10k tokens, which is exactly the same as Elite Dungeons 1 and Elite Dungeons 2. Now this item needs to be in your inventory when you're killing mobs if you want to receive a greatly increased drop chance of receiving a rare item. Now, interestingly, two more unexpected items have been added to the consumables section of this shop, and one of them is a Sophanum Slayer Enhancer, which allows you to get an increased drop chance at Magister keys. This costs 10k Dungeoneering tokens as well, and alongside this, the Ports Enhancer has been added, and upon activation you receive a random event in player-owned ports. This has 5 charges and it costs 50k Dungeoneering tokens. Now I'm not too sure how useful this will actually be, but it's an interesting reward nonetheless. Next up, if we check the Unlock tab, we'll see some very interesting additions have been made here as well. Firstly, you have the option to make Blackstone arrows, which cost 350,000 Dungeoneering tokens to unlock the blueprint, which gives you the ability to make the arrows yourself. Now alongside this, the shop has also been updated to include Demon Slayer, Undead Slayer, and Dragon Slayer blueprints for the respective sigils. Once purchased, you have the ability to make these sigils if you have the relevant items needed. Now we've explored the reward shop, it's time to take a deeper look into what these items actually do, and if there are actually any purposes to them at all. Now to make these sigils, you need to get 50 Blackstone hearts, which are a drop from some of the bosses in ED2, and onyx, and 30 types of components which are different depending on the type of sigil you are making. Now once a sigil is made, it has 1,000 uses, and when activated, it increases the damage against the selective monster type by 15% for 10 seconds. After this, the sigil slot incurs a cooldown for 60 seconds. Now, interestingly, this does stack with the Undead, Demon, and Dragon Slayer invention perks, which they in themselves give 7% flat damage bonus to the respective monsters, so in total you will have a 22% damage increase when the sigil is on. Now when thinking about utilizing these sigils, some very interesting scenarios come to my mind. It's important to remember that some bosses are actually counted as dragons, demons and the undead, and a very good example of this is the Rise of the Six Brothers, which are counted as undead creatures, and currently the Undead Slayer perk works on these, so I'm led to believe that this sigil would also work. Now I assume that the Dragon Slayer sigil will work on KBD and QBD, and the Demon Slayer sigil will probably work on Krill Tisserok, so you can expect faster boss kill times by utilizing these sigils in those bosses, so definitely a useful update if you ask me. Now next up, let's talk about the very interesting Blackstone arrows, which can be made from attaching Blackstone arrow tips to Elder Headless arrows at level 90 fletching. Now these arrows are very special, and that is because of their passive effect. Each hit you do to your target reduces their defense by 0.75% for a maximum of 15% after hitting the target 20 times. Now over the next few weeks, I'm really interested to see how these arrows will be utilized. Now I presume they'll be very useful at group bosses where one person would probably use range and reduce the defense of the boss so that the whole team can benefit from doing increased DPS. So the sigils and the arrow are some very nice rewards from ED3, but the main reward which everyone's going to be after is the tier 92 Eldridge crossbow. Now to make this crossbow you need to kill the Ambassador, and you need to get the stock, the limbs and the mechanism and combine them together. Now the unique thing about this crossbow is the special attack, which is called Spirit Soul and requires you to have 25% adrenaline. The special attack lasts for 15 seconds, and instead of using Soul Split to heal you, it does additional damage to your target for 4 times the amount that you would have healed. Now, this sounds very interesting and quite powerful, but yet again, we probably won't know how effective it actually is until someone actually has it and is able to test it for an extended period of time. And as Elite Dungeons have just released today, I don't think we'll be finding out for another week or so. But I'll be keeping an eye out on that and possibly making an in-detailed video on this crossbow, so keep an eye out on this channel for that. But anyway, that's it for the rewards. Now it's time to prep for the dungeons, and I have some useful items for you guys which may be helpful. The first thing that you want to have is a Salve Amulet E, which gives you a 20% accuracy and damage buff to the undead. Now you need to complete Taryn's Lair mini quest to get this, so go ahead and do that. It's very much useful for certain parts of the dungeon. Next thing I want to recommend is the Undead Slayer perk alongside Crackling 3. This is relatively easy to get with 4 explosive and 1 undead component. This perk gives you a flat 7% additional damage against the undead, which again is very useful for certain parts of the dungeon. But moving on, the dungeons are located on the east side of Daemonheim, so feel free to make a group and teleport there straight away. This is by far the best way to get here. Make sure you're geared up and you have plenty of food and brews, and make your way through the dungeon until you get to the first boss, and there I will show you the mechanics and how to kill it. So once you get to the first boss, it is really easy once you know the mechanics, and that's what I'm going to show you. Make sure your overload is up, your prayers are ready, and search the north side. Here you can vuln it if you're using mage, and before the first attack it's very important to not stand in the middle, so stand on the east side. Once you see the first attack, it is a big ass green poisonous breath, and if you're standing in the middle when he chooses to do this, you get hit for a shit ton of damage, so just stand at the side and avoid all damage in this regard. Now after the green attack, you can stand in the middle if you so wish, but it's most important to pay attention to the serpent's head and look for this animation, because that is the next attack, the swipe attack, and it can do a huge amount of damage, and it's a bit tricky to avoid if you're not paying attention. So basically, the serpent will drag its head from one side to the other, and if you're in its crosshairs, you will get spanked. And the best way to avoid this is just pay attention for the attack and run to the direction the serpent moves its head. So if it's going from west to east, run east and hug the corner and you will take no damage. Now the important thing to note about this attack is it always comes in twos. So if it goes from west to east, it will straight away after it's gone east go back from east to west. So you are now prepared for this because you know this. Make sure you either surge or run west before it manages to hit you. This way you can avoid this damage completely and have a safe fight. Now the boss just repeats this attack cycle with the green attack and then the 2 swipes, and all you have to do is DPS it down. At some point the boss will go to the other opposite side of the arena, and all you have to do when this happens is surge over to the other side, and the attack cycle is exactly the same. If you know how to master these mechanics, the boss will be a piece of piss and you will get it done in absolutely no time. The biggest thing is to pay attention to the head of the boss. As soon as you see it move, go to the other side, and remember that the swipe attack always happens in twos, so once you've gone to the other side and it's finished the animation, make sure to run backwards. That's all there really is to the boss, and make sure you just avoid the green attack and you're good to go. On to the second boss, and in between now and then it's probably best to equip your salve amulet, as the next section is mostly undead, and remember that the salve amulet works on this boss, so do try and use it if you have it. Once you enter the room, he will be using mage attacks, but they're really weak, so you can probably soul split it back very easily. Now the first mechanic to take note of in this fight is when the Necromancer will summon a portal, and it has a timer on top. Skeletons will be spawned around it, and it is so important to kill this portal before the timer on top runs out, otherwise you will take massive amounts of typeless damage, which will probably kill you. So just focus on the portal and make sure it's dead before it kills you. Once the portal is dead, clear the skeletons and go back to the boss. Now at some point the boss will start using range, and you can tell this because he will start dropping a death swiftness around him. Also the attacks will look like little sperms coming towards you, and all you need to do is just pray range and you will take reduced damage from this specific mechanic. Now at 190k health, the boss will fly away to one of the sides and you can't really do any damage to it, and it will summon one big mofo. This big mofo is what you need to be focusing on, so when it does this, try and bring down the big mofo as quickly as possible so you can move on with the fight. When the big mofo is spawned, he does uber heal the boss, and from my knowledge this is unavoidable, so just focus on the big mofo and try and not to take damage from him. Now where the boss fight becomes a bit tricky is when the big mofo is alive and the boss chooses to summon the portal, which has the DPS timer on top of it. Now if you can kill the big mofo before this, great, it will save you a lot of hassle, but I personally found that very tough to do. Remember, killing the portal is somewhat of a priority, otherwise it does almost one-shot you. If you do find that you are taking a lot of damage, feel free to use devotion, and this will probably extend when you kill the skeletons, and this will greatly reduce the amount of damage you take, so a very useful little tip there. Now once you've dealt with the portal, the skeletons and the big mofo, focus on the boss again and get him down. Unfortunately he will do the exact same thing again, and he will fly off to the other side and he will uber heal and spawn another big mofo, and you just have to repeat this and deal with the portal and the big mofo and the skeletons once more, but this time it's actually a bit tougher as this particular big mofo summons skeletons around him, so you have to deal with more mobs around you. So yet again, devotion is very useful, but anyway, deal with the big mofo, deal with the portal and the skeletons, and then focus back on the boss for the final phase. So after the second big mofo is dead, focus on the boss, and he will still do his portal attack, but now it's just time to DPS him down. One additional attack he has in this phase is that he will summon a row of ghosts, and they will slowly come towards a certain side, and if you do happen to be in their way, you will take a lot of typeless damage, but all you basically need to do to avoid them is surge through them or just run away. Very simply done, so hopefully that helped you out. And that's pretty much it for this fight, so once you've killed him, move on to the next path, and once you get to the Ambassador, teleport out and get ready for the next fight. Now, as soon as you enter the Ambassador's arena, if you are solo, you will get a guaranteed blue light coming towards you. Now, what you do is simply protect from mage, and this will negate the damage taken. Now, if you are in a trio group, it is much easier and only one of you has to take this damage. Now, it's important to take note of how this attack looks, the light blue light which comes towards you, as you will have to deal with it many times throughout the fight. If you are struggling with the amount of damage it does, make sure to devotion it or res it, and it can heal you, so it's pretty good if you're low on food. But apart from this specific attack, the Ambassador attacks with range, so make sure that you are praying range when he's doing his normal attacks. Now, the next mechanic that you may have to face is that you may get a timer above your head, and once you get this, you have an X amount of time to go and place a smoke. So once you see this timer nearly filling up, go away to a remote section of the arena and leave it there. Another mechanic that you should be aware of is that the Ambassador may summon some portal wormholes, and all you have to do to get rid of them is simply stun them. If you don't stun them and the timer runs out, you will take a shit ton of typeless damage, so just avoid this and make sure you stun them relatively quickly after they spawn. Now, after a while, the Magister will do what I like to call the Beyblade attack. You can tell this is coming because he will stall, say some random things, and some random little particles will shoot off to various sides of the arena. There will be several particles around the arena, and your job is to DPS them whilst dealing with this beam, which if you stand in, you take an absolute mammoth amount of damage, and it will almost certainly kill you. Now, this attack was particularly annoying because you didn't know where the beams were going to spawn. Now, we have learned that since then, if you stand behind the Ambassador, the beams won't spawn on you and you won't get one shot, so make sure you do this if you are learning the boss. Now, whilst the beams are spinning around, try your best to kill as many of those particles as you can. As you rotate around the arena, you can drop a couple of Dominion mines on them and they do work. They do a reduced amount of damage, only 4k each, but this does help regardless. Now, if you are in a team, what I found was particularly useful was the team stayed together and DPS each of the particles down, and this seemed to make it a lot easier. It is very important to make sure that you kill as many of these as possible, as if you don't kill them, it makes the next phase significantly harder. After the Magister is done spinning around, the remaining particles which you haven't killed will be absorbed by him, and you need to prepare yourself, make sure you're praying range, and if you didn't deal with the particles, you now need to deal with a lot of typeless damage. So if you only had one particle which went into the Magister, all you need to do is simply make sure you res after you receive the first range hit from the Ambassador, and this should negate the damage. Now, if he has absorbed multiple particles, then it becomes a little bit tougher, as after the first res, you may need to either debilitate and reflect to reduce the damage for the next one, or you could simply cade and take a couple that way. It's quite annoying and not always guaranteed that you will survive by using your defensives for these, so it's always best to try everything to DPS the particles down when you are running around the arena with the beams. But anyway, after this, get back on the Ambassador and do your best to DPS him as much as possible. If you are solo, you may need to do the spinning beam thing a couple of times, and it's quite tough to deal with. But if you are in a group, it's relatively easy to get him down, and once he's below 500k, you go on to the next phase. During this phase, he will spawn some Crassians, and you just ignore them and deal damage to him. At some point, Seiryu will come and he will heal you to full health by swooping in the arena. you don't really need to focus on this and just focus on the Ambassador. While you're DPSing, Seru will come down again and flame across the arena, and this will kill the Crassians. And at this point, all you need to do is just be focusing on the Ambassador and doing as much DPS as possible. Now, at around 200k, the Ambassador will spawn a lot of black hands around the arena, and loads of white clouds will come towards him and heal him for 2,500 each. Now, initially there's nothing you can do to stop this, but after this you can actually get in the way of the white clouds and block their healing path. Now, I didn't do this in the video as I didn't know this, but this does help if you are solo in particular. Alternatively, if you are one of those DPS gods, you could just DPS him down and ignore the white clouds, and if you can out DPS it, that's fine, but it definitely does make it easier to stand in the way and block the white clouds going to him. Now, the black clouds will be coming towards you at some point and damaging you, and if you're solo they can pile you and it's quite tough to deal with, but if you're trio it's not that difficult. So all I recommend is if you're trio, just focus on your DPS, and if the white clouds are near you, just stand in the way so they don't get to the Ambassador, and this will make your fight a lot easier. Overall, trio Ambassador isn't very tough, but solo is quite challenging, and I am working on a full solo guide, so keep an eye out for that. But hopefully these little mechanics which I've shown you will help you when you do your runs, and hopefully this helped a lot, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. In total, I think that this has been a fantastic update. It's really one of the most beautiful areas in game, and I'm really looking forward to see how the items we get from this dungeon are used in game. But for now guys, this has been a day of release guide. Things are probably going to change, but I really hope you do appreciate the massive amount of effort which I did to get this out to you guys today. And if you did, please do subscribe and leave a like. But for now, I'll see you next time to the outro.